Toodaloo. Okay, how are you? How have you been?
I've been good. It's been kind of boring being at home. I wasn't taking it very seriously when it first started, and I was like, it'll be over soon. I don't need to bring anything from studio back home. We'll just wait it out, and then we'll be back soon. Have all my work in progress. It's just laying there on the ground in my studio. And then when they extended it, I was like, oh no.
Oh, it's for real.
Yeah, it's real. Like, oh, maybe I really should consider transitioning working from studio to working from home. So here I am, like 2 weeks later. I brought like most of my stuff from studio home. There's some stuff like oil paints and like I live in a shared household. It's not really like I'm not gonna oil paint.
Yeah, it's not really conducive of like
Yeah,
subjecting
so
roommates to fumes and stuff.
yeah, like, and I have a cat. It's like it's not worth it.
Yeah.
So I kind of transitioned to like a lot more drawing. I brought like watercolors and gouache back, so we'll see if I can like pull out a tiny corner of this house to set that up.
It's sort of what I've been doing. For any person watching not knowing, I'm Juno and I'm from Gallery Aferro. This is Sandra. She interned with us in 2018
Yeah.
and
Uh, yeah, this summer.
summer of 2018. She's a artist in the Bay Area,
Yeah.
the Bay Area in California, and she went to school in MICA here on the East Coast. And we're going to talk about art and her experience being like in two very different parts of the country in such a short amount of time. But
Mhm.
back to the like carving out a corner of your house as a makeshift studio. It's kind of what I'm doing. I brought paper. I brought paper and acrylic paints home because one, I mean, I barely even oil paint at my studio at a Faro because of like the difficult like ventilation, and
Yeah.
because like there's like neighbors on either side of me, so I can't really like do that to them. Um,
Yeah.
but like paper is easy to travel with, and I just was like, okay, let me bring the paper, the paint, um, the like mediums I use for collage, anyways. And I've just been like hacking through magazines and painting self portraits, and like it's been fun. Actually, the art making of
Yeah.
it. Um, not that the quarantine is fun or anything.
Yeah.
So I've been asking the folks how the pandemic has affected the art making process, and some of them are really like bummed that they can't be in the studio, but some of them are taking this as an opportunity to continue working on whatever they were working previously at home.
Mhm.
So talk to me about the sketches you sent over to the Glimpse show. What were they? What were they going? Were they eventually going to become something?
Um, it's interesting. So I sent over 3 pieces for the show. The oldest one is the sketch of the two bathers in a bathtub. Honestly, that was probably the first time I ever decided to sketch for a painting. And after I did that, I usually sketch for my paintings, but most of them are non-colored. They're pretty loose and just gestural.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that one did become a painting. It was like the first one I did to map out like where bodies would go in like a small space.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the second one I did was the one with the two oh, it was one with the sunbather in the chair. That one never became a painting. I tried. I tried my best. It just didn't work. Actually, I think I tried twice. It has a very interesting composition. The first time I tried it, I tried the exact same layout where like the person is laying horizontal, but the composition of the canvas is vertical. I really was interested in like incorrect cropping,
Right.
basically. Like the figure is going one way, but the canvas is going the other. So you get a very like sliver view of it. And um, part of what I like a lot about drawing is that like things are really they can be unresolved but still feel finished.
Yeah.
You know, there's something really nice just about the whiteness of the paper and this like open space that like a drawing can be really nice, but a painting it won't work
This is true.
the same way. So I transitioned it, and I was like, yeah, that's a lot of like openness. I'm like, I didn't figure out what I wanted to do with this area, did I? So I enjoy it just as the drawing. I tried again to make it a painting, and I turned it into a horizontal
Hmm.
composition, and I still just it wasn't vibing. So I just enjoy it as a drawing. And then the very last one I sent over was a very moody, like blue green color pencil sketch. That came about because I had an original painting in mind of a woman standing behind a window at well, it wasn't at night at first. It was a picture of a woman standing behind a window behind a tree. It was actually it's really funny. It was inspired by an experience I had while I was interning at Aferro. So I lived in like a student dorm. I was subletting in a student dorm
Okay.
have like a building. Their building is like a shape of a U, like that. So if you live on like one side of the building, you can look across to the other side of the building and just see through the window. Like they don't have curtains. And we were really paranoid, me and my roommate, because at night you come home and the window is so bright and you're like, there's no curtains. Like you can just see them. And
Yeah.
then extrapolate a little further, you're like, oh, so you can see somebody. That means they could see us, right?
Yep. This
So
is
we would
true.
go down and test it. Like, can you, or can you not, in fact, see us? I think the verdict was yes, but I was like, I don't really care. It's fine. She was like, I'm avoiding the windows. But it was a very, very interesting moment. So I thought, wow, that would make a great painting. It's just this like, you see this figure illuminated at night. They don't know that you can see them, but at the same time, that means that like they can see you,
Hmm.
right? So the original version wasn't at night, but when it didn't work, like I had a lot of trouble getting through the first version and like what colors I wanted it, the mood. I went back with the exact same composition, but with totally different colors. That
Gotcha.
was like color pencil sketch. Was like, what if I mood shifted this? Like, what would it look like? And actually, that color pencil sketch is not the final version of the painting because then I took that sketch into Photoshop and like color shifted it even darker, so it's
Gotcha.
like even more the dead of night, and that became the color scheme for the final piece.
Nice.
Yeah.
I was gonna. It's good that you mentioned mood because I was like, even back then when you were interning, I take the liberty to look at like if someone has a website, I'm going and looking at their work, because it's not like I wouldn't say it's a like a luxury. I wouldn't say it's like a privilege, but it is a little bit of a luxury to be young, fresh out of college, and like have a domain. So if someone has a domain, I'm looking at the work. I'm looking at the things that like what they were. I don't know, like thinking about at like at different years.
Yeah.
Your work is pretty moody. I will say there's a like an attention to like overall like the overall color scheme of a piece does so much to dictate mood, and I notice that a lot in your work. And I notice also the attention paid to making sure figures always look like a certain way. I don't know. There's a slight discombobulation that happens
Yeah.
to your figures. I guess I just wanted to ask if you wanted to talk about that a little.
Yeah. I guess the best way that would make sense is I was like a lover of stop motion animation and like hand drawn animation before I ever did art.
Hmm.
And before I ever did painting too. So I would say like my first love of art was animation. Animation really is like storytelling. Figures are so important. Characters are so
Hmm.
important, and color. So when I came to painting, it was really like I felt like I had a lot of narratives to tell. But it's been like I think my journey about painting has really been like I understand what I like a lot. Like I
Hmm.
know like color is super super important to me in painting. Like before I even come to a painting or even idea of a painting, it starts with like maybe a color map or a color mood. And it's I don't usually like draw it out or test it. It's just usually in my head. Like I have a sense of like what shades go with what shades and where they should be, and then the painting will be like come to fruition when I mix the paint and I
Hmm.
hit like the color that I need to mix the paint. And then once I have like a few blobs mixed, then I'll know like okay, this is the next color. That's the next color. And then I put it on. I'm like, okay, what's the next color? That's just kind of how it comes about. But yeah, I really, really love movies. I'm like a big cinema fan, even though I I turned into a painter instead of like maybe
A
an
filmmaker.
animator or like a filmmaker. Yeah, I tried to. I was actually an animator before I was a painter, but um, there were a lot of things about animation that I glorified when I was younger that when you actually do it, you realize it's not for me.
Ton
Part
of
of
work,
it's
I imagine.
it's very tedious. It's very sedentary too. Part of what I like about painting is like I can stand up and paint. There's motion and action, whereas animating the work has motion and action, but the work of making it does not.
Yeah.
So it really involved like many long hours of sitting like this close to a light screen or to a digital screen and just like
Ooh.
crack and moving things like a few inches to the side every just to get like a second of animation. So it's just like it didn't work out, and I think what I've realized through my painting is that I still love narrative, and I love movies, but I've always found it interesting that a lot of my references for my paintings come from stills. They're like movie stills, or so like I really want a single image, usually without a lot of context, to
Hmm.
try to tell a whole story. So that's probably the best way I can describe like my figurative paintings.
That's like exactly what I like exactly where I wanted to get at. Um,
Mhm.
because it makes complete sense. The kind of almost I hesitate to say the word random about anything because there anything that appears random to a viewer may or may not be random to the artist. There's times like I like have my like I some like with my art I it's like I set out to do experiments mostly as opposed to like setting a scene.
Mhm.
But there are well, I guess I can't say I have because all the portraits I usually do are more sort of like, okay, you stand there or you sit there. The
Mhm.
background's fine. I'm mostly interested about what you look like, what you're wearing, and if the light is like warm. I like really warm light on
Mhm.
my subjects or myself when I'm photographing
Mhm.
for portraiture. Um, but there's like the there's a cool like a general cool toneness that is present in your work, and like you said, you're setting a scene, and it all of a sudden gives me like so much context. I'm gonna like go back and look over some of those paintings again and think what like uh,
Yeah,
this is a scene she set. Um,
right.
so yeah, you kind of described your art and your inspirations. I was also really curious about the bike like the bi-coastal experience. Like I'm an immigrant. I'm South American originally. So, but really, I've been in the United States since I came here. Like I haven't like left New Jersey
Yeah,
for like 13 years essentially, or more.
yeah.
Definitely more than 13 years. Like I go to New York, but I don't, oscillate between places or haven't in a period of time. So can you tell us what it
Mhm.
was like to go from the Bay Area to Maryland, for
Mhm.
college?
Yeah. Um, it's very interesting. Like when I first came to the East Coast, it wasn't to study art. So I was like a science major at
Okay.
Carnegie Mellon before I transferred to art school. So I wasn't really doing art before the Bay Area. Like even though I grew up in the Bay Area, I wasn't really an artist.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I came to MICA and like and even like Carnegie Mellon, I did art for the first time. Mostly I experienced the art scene in the East Coast and in these like smaller cities, I would describe them as. Like they're not New York big, but they have their own art scene.
Yeah.
And what I kind of like, I mean, I still miss Baltimore a lot. What I kind of like about it is how like cozy it is. Everyone, we've got a great art scene because we have so many colleges in that area. Our art school is like smack dab in the middle of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of like self-run galleries, artist-run galleries, nonprofit spaces. So they have a great art scene. It's very like cozy and niche. Um, and then when I moved back, I came back home after I graduated from art school, mainly because one, I need to I need to go back home to see my mom, and two, I was offered. Well, first I was offered an internship at Root Division. It's a nonprofit arts organization in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
So it's in the Bay. But then also I was onboarded as a studio artist maybe half a month after that. So they gave me a studio space for subsidized rent. And so I've had the opportunity to like do some like art networking, making work on both sides of the coast. I would say the biggest difference is audience, if that
Okay.
makes sense. Like people's tastes are really different, right? Like, and I'm sure it depends on like what organization you're part of too. Like as part of Root Division, we host a lot of like public events, networking things. Like people come by to your studio. We have open studio events, um, but you meet a ton of different kinds of people through those kinds of events. It's very very interesting because um, the best way probably to describe it is part of the excitement and maybe also disappointment of being an artist is that everyone comes through.
Yeah.
People who are like really snooty and high up, they have a lot of money and they know a lot of art, they come through and see your work. Then you also have people who are really commercial and like they do like decorating for architecture or hotels. And you're like, I'm not sure if that's my clientele or not, but they come through too. And then you have also random people who come through who may not know anything about art or
Yep.
just hobbyists or like just friends of somebody who's interested in art and they come through as well. So you meet tons of people. And just the experience is like some people drive with your work and some people don't. Like it just that's just what happens. It's very, very hard to like find like the exact right audience who just gets it. Like some people click right away, some people come back and they're interested, and some people just like they just don't get it and they just don't care. Like, you know what? Everyone comes through. So I think, yeah, in the West Coast, I found that things are a little more commercial here. I'd say maybe because a lot of art schools, or maybe I was in an art school neighborhood in the
Mm-hmm.
East Coast, people like a little more conceptual, a little more like sculpture. Paintings are always popular because they're like wall hanging, they're very portable. But I would say they're a little more like academic, experimental. Here in the
For
Bay
sure.
Area, especially San Francisco, they really like commercial stuff. They're like maybe it's like the whole like Bay Area workaholic techie thing, but they're like, I can envision it right here, right now. What's the
Yeah.
price?
They want like
Right?
they want a
They
big
want it
painting
perfect. They
for
want it now, and it's like I get it. Like I can see that on my wall, or I could see that in my business, or I could see that in my show. Like they want it like finished. It's very like
for their startup that
yeah, they want it for
that
their
they're
tech
starting up.
startup. Like I think that would be great at my mastermind. I'm like, oh, all right.
That makes total sense. It almost what you're describing almost sounds like the experience artists have on social media where
Oh yeah.
where you like it's kind of difficult to build an audience, but when you do, they almost begin to expect you to make a certain kind of thing. So even people who only see your work and don't ever interact with you have tastes and expectations, and either your art fits their bill or it doesn't. Um,
I have I'm sorry, this is like a small detour, but I have a really funny story about that.
yeah.
I had a piece actually connected to that painting about the two people in the bathtub. So that piece I was selected to be in like this traveling national jury show with that
Okay.
piece. So we got promoted on a pretty big Instagram that like it was bigger than anything I had at that time because I was like really new in art. I don't think I even had Instagram at that time actually. Something like that. Or maybe it just started it. But anyway, they make a post for you, and I scroll through the post to like look at the comments to see what people say, and I have this like one lady who's like super into it, and she follows me. She writes me a message, she writes a comment, and like, do I know this lady? Because like most people don't engage this much, especially with
Yeah.
someone they don't know, right? I'm like, I don't think I know her. Like from her bio, from her page, it doesn't say that she's in school. It doesn't say that she went to MICA. It doesn't say like anything about a person that I would have met. So I'm interested. I go to her page because I'm wondering why is she so like into my work or my thing. And I see one of her recent posts is like, I just broke up with my significant other. I'm like, all right, now I see the audience for my painting. So I'm like, that's very funny. And I'm also like, I'm so glad that my painting could bring you some humor and some like happiness and some relation,
Yeah.
to your part. So she was really into it.
To her moody time.
Yeah.
No, but uh like open studio experiences are also pretty like they're events in themselves. It's almost like you have to like psych yourself up for the possibility of like having a ton of people come through, or the rare day, not the rare day, like the occasion where you definitely see people on either side of you getting like tons more visitors than you are,
Oh,
folks who like come in, look, and leave versus folks who like come in and want to strike a conversation up with you. So there's some of that that doesn't get like talked about, especially if you go to a.
oh yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about it, like we can be honest. Like I've had conversations with my studio neighbors where they're like, "I feel like a bug under a microscope or animal at the zoo." But you gotta perform for people, right? They come in, you're like, "I'm the traveling salesman. Come see my wares. Like, are you interested in this? What do you think about this?" Or you can just like, silently be in the background and be like, wondering what they're looking at. Will they ask
Yeah,
me a question? Say anything? But they just walk out and like,
yeah,
like,
wasn't that
sometimes
one
I don't
wasn't meant
know
to be.
what to do with my what like it's like I don't know what to do with my body. Like I'm like I go to my friends and I hang out in their studio instead because I'm like I feel so much more comfortable to be in a group. Like oh we have a crowd of 2 or 3 artists and just being like hello I'm alone in my studio. Maybe someone can pull it off, but when I'm alone, I feel like it's a little too intense with people. It's my
Yeah,
experience. It's like when they come in, they want to kind of look at your work and like, oh, I'm being assaulted by lots of work. Like I just need a moment to process. They don't really need you like in your face right away. So like I kind of like to like be outside of my studio, let people wander in, and then come back in when like I feel like they're ready to
hmm,
engage or interested in engaging. I find that that works best rather than just sitting there in the corner and you watching them as they watch your work. It's like it's a little intense that way.
that's that yeah. What you're describing is true. Sometimes I like have music on. I'll like have my radio
Yeah,
because in my studios where I have my CD collection, so I'll just pull out something good and play it. And usually I'll be tinkering. I'll be sitting at my work
yeah,
table, like doing some not nothing intense. Like I'm not
yeah.
painting hardcore. I'll usually be
Mm-hmm.
like something paper related, something flat. Maybe I'm cutting it out. Maybe I'm coloring it in. Something that like lets someone like peer over what you're doing without it
Yeah,
feeling too intrusive. But it's so interesting the whole like have like finally having a studio, especially if you go to a school that doesn't where like their studio setting is like shared as opposed to like you having your
yeah,
own little, even if it's a little cubicle of wall and like table for your brushes and paints. And even like all that etiquette we're talking about, the difficulty in like if you're not a person who is a good like talk, like so much of art is like being able to talk and write about yourself,
yeah,
and you
yeah.
like you almost you're I don't know if like I don't know if it was like how I went to school or not, but it's you almost don't get told that it's you know, or you have to for some artists. 'Cause I also work in the gallery as so I get to see some of the behind the scenes of it as an arts admin person. Artists who aren't very good at their statements or
Yeah.
give us like bios that are a little too short or stuff like that. So that conversation of talking to artists about their like the technical aspects of it from
Yeah,
this
like the
side,
presentation.
yeah, it's also just stuff you like learn along the way. Can't always prepare for it.
Mhm.
But yeah, so like what's next on the table for you?
Um, kind of interesting. I already started working on this kind of project before the quarantine happened, and it kind of turned out to be like, maybe this is my new thing. I wanted to start um, moving a little bit away from painting, and I started making a lot of digital work, or maybe I used to call it digital painting, but I don't really want to call it that anymore because I don't want to use the word painting anymore. I find it like maybe one of my small insecurities is that like there are a lot of people who are painters, like a lot, like when I go to my studio program, like the vast majority, if not half, are like painters.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, how do like my painting doesn't look like other people, but if you tell people you make paintings, and they assume certain things.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to do something more unique or something more interesting, like in addition to it, or maybe surprise people a little bit. So I started going back to this whole like process-based work, sketching, in progress. I told you I don't usually like color for my paintings. Like I'll have color references. I won't like color the pieces. And I used to make like a lot of drawings on paper sketches for paintings. But I started making these like strange Photoshop collages.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of like half painting, half collage. The newest series that I'm working on that I'm very like I was in the middle of it and then quarantine hit and now I'm trying to figure out how to continue that series um, while at home, which maybe it's still possible, but I was making a whole series of different objects collaged into eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So flowers, I like images of soldiers and spider webs, different natural things and sometimes undescribable things collaged into images of my eyes, images of like my friends' eyes, or like things that I source from like social media that I see in my feed. Um, it's all inspired by like my post art school graduate life. It's been a lot. Like in school, art is so much easier maybe in a way because like you have space, you have feedback mostly. Like you get critiques no matter what you make, even if you think it's poopy, like someone will see it, they'll give you feedback on it. You feel like you move forward. It's sometimes hard after school to feel like what's the next direction? Is
Yeah.
what I'm working on the right way? When you like it's just you. So I started going more into my own thoughts and feelings, my own experiences. Um, so a lot of the imagery, it's all like things I think about all the time. It's sourced from like movies that I watch or think about all the time. It's sourced from it's things that inspire me in my life and also things that I see around people I meet all the time. Like my boyfriend's mom is obsessed with like her garden and flowers, and so I'm around flowers a lot. So different kinds of flowers that I know she is obsessed about, I source into my paintings, and then I have collages of like top of my eye, like the bottom of my boyfriend's eye, and just different ways to like manipulate figure and maybe something that's like non-objective into something that is like experiential. I think a lot of the crops that I do are very zoomed in, so
Mm-hmm.
you can hardly tell it's like an eye at all. It's really just a very guttural experience of like color and light because it's really what an eyeball is like color light and texture.
Yeah.
So that's the newest thing. And I was turning these digital sketches into paintings, at least some of them. I still have a lot of digital sketches that I compiled up that aren't paintings, and I'm also been experimenting a lot with digital print media. So I've turned some of these Photoshop collages into prints just to see if I like this like metallic quality of a print and trying out different kinds of paper and things like that. So that's like my newest thing.
Nice. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, like in the quarantine, I've needed to transition from like canvas to paper, but I was like, so there's like been an influx of artwork into the gallery that we're sort of managing as our like part of our new inventory, and a lot of it is like framed art on paper. Um,
Mhm.
and it's just like been a lot of it is prints, but some of it isn't, and the stuff that isn't is just sort of like, oh wow, I forgot you could paint on paper. Like you don't just
Oh
have to.
yeah, I love painting on paper.
It's like a weird freedom because uh even even I'm having this kind of existential thing about painting, and I think it's not uncommon. I think a lot of people have this thing about painting in their lives, because you kind of you either it's either something you start with or something you like land on. um I like started with it, but
Yeah.
I'm so interested in like different work processes and different like media that for me to make something like from beginning to end that's just paint on canvas is
Yeah.
like massive. Like it's so much effort to just paint all the way through. I'm always thinking like, oh, how can I let me pull this out. Like, how can I glue like a colorful little oval on it somewhere?
Yeah.
I have like tons of these just like laying around because it's like what I do with my time. Um, and it's like, well, you can't if you and like at this point, 50% of what I do is collage. So I'm thinking of like my title. I'm thinking of what the work what the work is
Yeah.
at the end of the day. It's
Yeah.
it's
What
all
you saw.
becoming like very earnestly mixed media as opposed to like just painting. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm like becoming more and more okay with that. Like, so as long as the final image is like representative of something I want to say and something I am happy to like express, I'm a little less interested in like like calling it a painting
Yeah.
because like only 50% of it's painted, the rest is glued on.
I want to speak too about like I think this is a good conversation to have with you since your work like also walks the line between representational and abstract.
Hmm.
And so a lot of the newer work I've been doing is a marked departure from some of the more representational figurative elements I've made. Even though like my figures are they're not very realistic looking,
Yeah.
they're still recognizable as figures. All the new work I've made is like it's not a figure really. Like if you zoom into an eye, like I'm not sure how to quantify that. But anyway, it's moved very, very much more abstract. So that's just something I'm very like thinking about a lot. Is like it's interesting. I don't know. I remember when I was at art school, I had a fight with my teacher about it. Like I was like, I just don't believe in abstract work. I like think it's just like too empty, and I just don't know what it means. And it's like, oh, if it's not like, oh, I don't have a definedness of it. Like, what am I supposed to get from it? Like, I'm not sure that like the color yellow has emotion.
Hmm.
Like, sure, yellow with like some kind of context or some kind of meaning or something has emotion, but like just yellow, I'm not sure. So I was like, I will never make abstract work. And a little guilty confession. Like during this quarantine, I've been making a lot of abstract drawings, like a lot of just color and abstract. I find them really meditative, and I don't know what to make of them yet. I think it's because like a lot of my newer work has become so much more abstract, and part of me is like wondering why it is I'm like moving towards this direction. So far as I can understand, like I think it has to do with your question about experiences on the East Coast and the West Coast. Trying to find audience is really, really difficult for an artist, right? Like on one hand, you don't want to compromise like who you are and what you do,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, it like if you have a message you're trying to get and people don't get that message, or for my thing, I'm like, how much do I want to explain for people to get the message, right? Like, can the artwork explain it immediately on its own, or does it need like a little bit of information? Does it need a title? Does it need so recently I've been thinking I would just like the work to speak for itself. I don't even want to talk about anything. I'm like tired of giving my same spiel at
Hmm.
every single studio event, right? I'm like, what if the work was just super iconic, like an abstract image or an icon? And like for me, the icon of the eye is like it's what I landed on is because one, it has references to cinema, but two, it has references to painting bodies
Hmm.
too. Um, so I'm like, well, everyone understands eye, right? I don't need to explain that. Like, they'll get that. Like, other things like solar imagery, like natural imagery, like it's very evocative. Plus, like, colors never change for me. I always really love color. Plus, color, it just makes it like, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. That's like why my newest project. I'm like, I wonder if changing up my style or changing up the imagery, I can still communicate and maybe communicate in a more direct way is what I'm thinking. But yeah,
I think that's the crux of it, communicating directly what you want to say, as opposed to somehow the art like expressing it. There's a lot in the cognition between how you conceive it, how you can execute it, and then how an audience receives it, and you can't control
mm-hmm.
how an audience receives it. So
Yeah.
the at the very least to be able to lead the audience in the right direction, giving them something a little more direct can can be the difference between needing to stand next to somebody and like walk them through your process to like, and as opposed to them seeing something and having the work do all of it for them. I sort of landed on that last year, just because making art that's about our current political landscape is not in my like wheelhouse of interests. I think there are a lot of artists who are doing that already very well. Um, and I also, even if I was going to do something like that, I think it's tricky because I don't want it to just become this kind of like an over glorified political cartoon. Because again, I think if it's going to be a political cartoon, there's people who are doing it well, and for me to develop something to develop a language to be able to say it the correctly, like it would take too long. So I
Yeah.
thought, I made this like small. I'm trying to like it's a small square canvas, and
Yeah.
I just used text. I used imagery that evoked kind of like what I was going for, but at the end of the day, the text on the painting told you everything you needed to know about how I was feeling. And the title, the text of the piece said, "I couldn't go home even if I wanted to," and it's a statement on, yeah, like immigrants being told to go back where they're from, and like,
Yeah.
hey, like even if I wanted to, I couldn't, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just that, and so many people told me that this small, really colorful canvas with these very in your face words. People said that it held a lot of like it held a lot of weight, and it held a lot of sadness when they looked at it, and it didn't hold those emotions for me. It was a little more of a catharsis, but they got what I was saying, like
Yeah.
the long, the short, the too long didn't
Mm-hmm.
read. Like, if you want your audience to get a thing from the work, put the thing in the work, is more or less what I'm saying. But like,
Mm-hmm.
it's tricky. It's tricky in the relationship between like figurative art and more abstract art, trying to get a message like somewhere in between, like in between this battle of um like workness, like to fit in a message in it has a
Mm-hmm.
like I applaud anyone who like meets the challenge head on. But there's something to be said about abstract art giving you the grounds to be able to imbue it with a more direct meaning, as opposed to figurative art, because you're almost like it almost becomes too personal. I think even if a figure
Yeah.
uh, isn't rendered to like realistic proportions, the fact that there is a figure there, the fact that there is like a facsimile of a human on this thing you're looking at, um, like it plays to people's
Right.
ideas and emotions in a different way than something that's a little
Mm-hmm.
more conceptual and executed
Yeah.
abstractly.
Yeah. I think you said that perfectly. That made perfect sense to me. I think about it like how much it reaches the front of your brain. Like when I see a figure, I'm like, okay, that's a person. And then when I see a tree, I'm like, all right, that's a tree. And I'm like, I see a building, I'm like, all right, that's a building. Versus like something abstract just like passes right over and just goes straight to like emotion or sensory.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know what that is. So I'm like, I guess I just feel whatever that is, right? Rather than trying to understand the components of it or like what am I looking at. It's more of like, oh, gut punch. Like, oh, it has like a certain like temperature feeling to it. So it's kind of what I'm interested in. Maybe it's like somewhere in the middle of it. I always felt like on that spectrum, I've leaned like figurative, abstract. in the middle. I've always leaned like a little more figurative, but now I'm like pushing a little more abstract. So I'm interested to see where it goes and like if this will be like an enduring thing for me.
That's good. And I don't think abstract. I think a lot of people think of abstract. They think of these like really formless things. And I'm a huge advocate for like geometry and like lines and like
Oh,
shapes. You know.
okay. Can you give me a sec? I'll show you something.
Sure.
I'll show you something. Didn't mean to cut you off, but
No
like when
problem.
you said lines and formulas and geometry,
Yeah.
like these are like the variety of things. And like if you know like my paintings, like or my figurative paintings, like this is not what that is. But for some reason I found them like very, very meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Look at
So
that.
they're very easy to like make make variations of, you know.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm interested in these. This is kind of like my new thing.
Nice. And there's still room for being gestural. You know, there's like I see all those like in between outside of the triangles. There's like those two vertical like panels that are just mostly solid color. There's a lot of room there for to be gestural with like paint application um and all that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess thank you for joining me on this Saturday morning call, Sandra.
Oh, it was a
Cool.
lot of fun to talk to.
Likewise,
Like
it's been.
we don't get a lot of art conversations in this quarantine era, so to be able to talk about work is like, oh, it's exciting again.
It is. It gets
Yeah,
your own gears turning about the stuff you want to do.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Well,
All right.
join us next time for conversations with artists here at the Gallery Aferro Instagram page. But yeah, hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye.
Stay safe, you know.
We'll do. Stay
Bye.
indoors.
Yeah, stay indoors. Make art.
We'll do. We'll do, Chief.
Bye, Gino.
Bye
Thank you for
bye.
talking to me.
Of course.